In 1988, French daredevil Jean-Marc Boivin, I might be getting the pronunciation wrong of that, paraglided from the summit of Mount Everest to Camp 2 in roughly 11 to 12 minutes. And to this day, it remains the quickest climb down that you'll ever see of a mass scale. Right up until this week, of course, when yours truly has now had to come on the podcast here to discuss this new movement at Starks Park. Welcome back, of course, to the Oh No 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 podcast. I'm your host this evening, Robbie Weir. It's not just a game that we've got to talk about tonight. We've had a few of these over the last year or so. But yeah, it's a new manager as well. I'm joined firstly by Leslie Mabin. How are you getting on, Les?
So there's another French daredevil, Alain Robert, who's been famed over the last 15, 20 years for climbing skyscrapers without any safety equipment or any harnesses at all. And he takes great delight in proving everybody wrong when he does things. And I'm in particularly good form today because I suspect I'm one of only a small number of Rovers fans who actually have the receipts of saying that we thought Dougie Imrie was a brilliant manager and that we're absolutely delighted to have him at Starks Park. So welcome, Dougie.
I'm changing my tune. Before I was less than flattering, shall we say, when Ian Murray departed. But, you know, you've got to own this sort of thing, don't you? Especially if you're on a podcast you put out there, you've got to take any flack that you get back, which is absolutely fine in situations like this. It does occur. So, Dougie Imrie, get to work. Come on. Scott Fleming is also joining us this evening. How are you getting on, Scott?
Yeah, doing good, mate. It was a little bit bizarre to see Dougie Imrie in a Wraith Rovers tracksuit, to say the least. But yeah, happy. More than anything, I was on last week for the pre-match for the Arbroath game, saying that I was hoping that we would have a manager basically in the dugout for the Scottish Cup game. So the board have delivered that. So I've got to be happy with that. I mean, I was openly saying that he wasn't necessarily the first target, but yeah, at the end of the day, he knows the division. So yeah, good luck to him.
Yeah, 100%. So Rovers, of course, do have their new manager. Dougie Imrie joins us from Greenock Morton, a 4-year stint at Capello that he had there to sort of numerous different successes in sort of cup competitions and across the league. News initially came through Lincolnham. That broke on Monday evening through Scott Burns at Daily Record. And then as soon as 1:30 the following day, on the Tuesday, he'd been appointed in the role. Leslie, just your initial reaction to the move.
Was actually my first thing was I was kind of surprised that effectively this is a sideways move. So in the summer, we know he was quite heavily linked, and I believe there had been talks about Dougie Imrie going to Partick Thistle. And at the time I thought that's a really good move for all parties concerned. He's been pound for pound the best manager in the Championship over the last few seasons, and he's earned the right to have a crack at one of the clubs with one of the best squads in the division. And then it fell through for whatever reason at Partick. And then you kind of thought, well, at some point he's going to be moving up probably to the lower end of the Premier League if he continues on the trajectory he has with Morton. So I was pleasantly surprised that we were linked with Dougie Imrie. I thought, well, this is interesting if it comes off. I mean, I don't know. As I say, I was kind of surprised, and effectively in terms of the quality of the squad, the position in the league, the stats over the last few seasons, Morton have been, for the most part, level, if not better than us. So I'm a little bit surprised he's come here, but I'm very glad he has come here.
Yeah, I can only echo those sentiments. Again, it's one where sort of post-Murray I've been quite dismissive of him, just in terms of particularly sort of the style up to that point that he brought to the table with Morton. Was, in my view, very direct. I'm sure that he would argue otherwise, and you've got to play to your strengths, etc. However, I think the last year really proved that he does have more to his game than just that in a management sense, which has been, I feel like my tone very much shifted, or my mindset very much shifted on that one. Particularly, you look at the first two performances that he had against us. In those games under Neil Collins last year, where there was a couple of times, a couple of goals that they actually scored, where they just split us right open, played it right through the middle, ball on the deck, fast moving passes. Scott, just what did you make of the news? Firstly, when it was leaked through Scott Burns that he was under consideration, and then he was going to say yes to the job. What did you make of the news?
I must say I was a little bit surprised, just the fact that all the names that were being linked were basically either guys that were out of a job, or the only guys really that were being sort of mentioned in a job was like Gary Naismith at Stenhousemuir. And then, I mean, in all the articles like the Courier and other papers that were picking up on the Rovers job were all just describing basically guys that were all kind of. I mean, Chris Doolan's name was there as well. So Dougie Imrie was obviously mentioned at the beginning when Barry Robson got when Barry Robson got sacked, but I don't think anybody thought that we were actually going to go for Dougie Imrie, because I think if anything we possibly would have went for him after Ian Murray, like a lot of folk thought might happen. But even at that time, there was quite a lot of the fan base were not happy with us even being linked, as we know fine well in this podcast. But Robbie, you weren't on your own, because I know loads of folk that were also on that sort of path and not really wanting Dougie Imrie in charge. So I think I would say that in the last sort of 12 months, he probably has actually kind of shown a little bit more to his sort of arsenal as a manager in terms of what he's got. Tactically, I still think that we possibly could have gone for somebody a little bit more, I don't know, exciting, I suppose. But at the end of the day, he's possibly one of the more safer hands you could have gone for, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
At the same, if you look at it that way. Again, I just laughed when the Rave TV interview popped up and the socials of the sort of minute clip of his first training session, and just seeing him at Starts Park in a Rovers tracksuit, as I mentioned already. I'm just laughing for the first minute of his interview, going, how has this even happened? Because, like, not at one point did I think that Dougie Imrie was ever going to be the Raith Rovers manager. Like, the amount of abuse we've given him over the last 3-4 seasons, I didn't ever see it happening. So, yeah, but aye, for me, he was probably sort of fourth, fifth choice, if you want to call it that. I had a few others, like I mentioned last week, that I potentially would have liked ahead of him. But at the same time, any manager that comes in at Raith Rovers, I'm always going to give them the chance to prove themselves and prove me wrong. And I hope he really does, because that means ultimately the Rovers are doing well if he does that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the criticism, particularly scathing and often unfounded, can be a great motivator for people to go out and prove people wrong. So who better to do it if you're going to bring in a coach? I know that you mentioned sort of might have been able to go for a more sort of attractive name as such, but we've gone through that spell with Barry Robson. We've brought him in, and you look at his CV. Now, I know that how it ended, but I think that a lot of the thing with Barry Robson is that you one of the career highlights for him in terms of management is that the fact that in the Europa League, I think it was, that they managed to beat Eintracht Frankfurt. Now, obviously, there's a very different sort of approach coming in with Dougie Imrie, and you rightfully point out he's brought stability to Morton. They are a club, but when he first started the first season, they were rock bottom after Gus McPherson, and he came in and he turned it around completely. And for all that you might have, myself and others might have labelled criticisms, there's no denying that he's been able to get tune out of players, get them beyond their level, and that's kind of the sort of track record that he's had. Let's just come back to you. We've spoken about our own reactions. What did you make in terms of just your view in terms of social media and reading on things like, for instance, Pine Bovril, if you've had a chance to take that in, or any sort of comments online, just how it's been received and the general reaction from the Rover support? Because it seems to be one that's garnered a lot of people nodding their head saying, aye, actually, that's a pretty good appointment.
I mean, I've not been on Pine Bovril for quite a while, but certainly from what's been on Twitter, I think, as you say, about over half of the quote tweets and responses all start with happy with that. And I think that kind of sums up where a lot of people are at, is that out of the appointments we could have had, it's probably a pretty reasonable and safe choice. To an extent, I think that has to be a bit of acceptance and recognition on our side that this is not the team that finished second 18 months ago. You know, it's a team that probably hasn't had the same sort of level of investment in the squad that we maybe saw a couple of seasons ago. It certainly is not playing with the same level of confidence as it was 18 months, 2 years ago, and that this maybe is the kind of thing we're needing. I mean, so when we brought Neil Collins in, you were thinking, wow, this is really exciting. A guy who's got all this experience in the States and down south, and he's got this squad and he can kick them on. We're needing a very different kind of manager now, and I do not mean that in a sort of disrespectful way at all. We're needing somebody who is maybe able to get players who are, there's undoubtedly quality there, but who need that bit of confidence and that bit of motivation, and just to get them to perform. And that, like you say, Robbie, that's absolutely something Dougie Imrie's done at Morton across multiple seasons. You can't deny that. So, as I say, I think the reaction I've seen has been broadly positive. I can understand why those who maybe, some people might think, well, why don't we go for somebody else like Rhys McCabe, for example? And that's a perfectly valid view. But I think by and large, as I say, what I've seen has been pretty positive.
Yeah, I was chatting with one of our listeners as such, but more importantly, a good friend, Graham Paul, who I used to play football with, and he came out with, he did make sure he was asking for credit on this, and he says, there's a good quote from Rocky Free that applies to this situation. Looking forward to working with you, certainly had enough of working against you, which is, that's a very that's the approach there, and that's one that I think that everyone can get behind in terms of that. So to look at Dougie Imrie's track record, Scott, starts off 21-22 season, as I say, started off rock bottom of the league, coming in to replace Gus McPherson, takes him up to 7th place, and then after that, 2 5th place finishes, going through 2022, 23, 23, 24, and then last season, 6th place finish in 24, 25th. Now, during that time, I think it has been clear there's been sort of numerous different clubs. I know that Inverness had came in for Dougie Imrie at some point, and then they opted to go for Duncan Ferguson instead. So we saw how that one went. But then on top of that, you've got Partick Thistle coming in for him as well. A change of scenery for him, but also one where he might feel that with Morton, with all due respect to them, I think there's been quite publicised difficulties in terms of they had the Dalrada sponsorship, they had to wait for MCT to pass a vote before that got applied, and that then in turn had an impact on the budget. There was a well publicised incident, bizarrely, with Andy Milne, which occurred after a game after Raith Rovers, which then in turn led to his suspension, and he, seemingly Dougie Imrie, very keen to get back to working with Andy Milne in a coaching capacity. Do you think that this is maybe a new opportunity where he's looked at the Rovers and said, actually, there's quite a lot that both parties can bring to the table?
Yeah, well, I think he openly said that in his short interview with Davey on Rave TV, was that he thought that both his sort of beliefs and expectations and the clubs seem to align quite well, and that's why ultimately he's currently here as our new manager, I think. So, one thing I do think that Dougie Imrie has done well at Morton, you've obviously touched on the sort of things in his stint there, was that he has clearly done pretty well in terms of working on a pretty small budget in the league, and he's been sort of probably in a club that's the bottom 3 or 4 budgets every season he's been there. So obviously, I don't think that we're one of the sort of biggest paying squads or clubs in the league, but I also don't think we're one of the worst. We're probably in that sort of 5th position currently, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think for him, it probably means that he might get a little bit extra sort of money to sort of play around with for new players. In terms of what he can do for us this season, I think it's going to be interesting come January, because he's now got this. This is also one of the reasons that was so key to get somebody in now or very soon, was to give the manager a month to really work with his team, see what he needs, and then go in January and say to the board, right, I maybe need 2 to 3 players, and these are the positions I need. Let's go and get them in January. and whether that means that we need to potentially also look into the loan market again, I don't know. But I'm looking forward to actually January getting here, because I think, well, most Rovers fans will be, because we've clearly struggled to score goals this season, and it's so obvious that we need another goal scorer, or at least another player or two in that final third that's going to create chances for us, because we're right now, even players like Dylan Easton, even he can't pull hundreds of rabbits out of hats, which he's needing to do right now to even get us winning games and stuff like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what way Imrie goes about it. And as I say, it was sort of in the I'd say this season alone is the first time that I've actually thought Dougie Imrie isn't just playing boomball or hoofball or whatever. Like, he's genuinely actually signed players which are under 6 foot and can play a bit.
Yeah.
I know last season he had the likes of Aaron Lyle and stuff as well, who then went to Ross County and is actually back at Morton now. But that was the start of him obviously trying to adapt to a new style. He's obviously gone to that now, so it'll be interesting to see if that's the sort of. I mean, for us, openly, I would say that we do, on paper, have better players than Green at Morton. So I would like to hope that he can probably do better than what he was doing with Morton with us. But yeah, the proof will be in the pudding, I suppose, in the coming weeks. I don't expect him to be getting all the results instantly. I would like to hope that he gets a good sort of manager bounce, as they always say. But I mean, ultimately, from after this cup game, he's got one hell of a month coming up in December to deal with. I mean, he's got St Johnstone away for his first game in charge in the league, then Ross County at home, who I know they're not going well this season, still a solid enough team in this division, and then you've got Partick and Dunfermline. You're playing basically the 4 bigger sides in the league as well. So like it's a tough ask, but I'm pretty sure at the same time, Dougie Imrie seems to be the sort of manager, he'll be kind of almost licking his lips at this, going, "Bring it on." Like, he's that sort of guy. And I was speaking to Ali about this actually yesterday. He brought it up to me, was, can you imagine on the 27th of December, I feel sorry for the 4th official in these derbies now. It's going to be absolute cinema on the touchline with Dougie Imrie versus Neil Lennon.
Absolutely. And it'll be one to keep an eye on. I think you're absolutely right to talk about the games that we've got coming up, because that does seem like the types that he's going to absolutely thrive against, and to be able to get people up for. And yeah, I'm going to come back to his interview in a little bit. Leslie, just with yourself, Scott's obviously mentioned the gradual change. Has that been one that you've noticed as well over the last 12 months? How much has your perception changed? Because it's something that I'd sort of touched on myself. Scott's mentioned it too. Is that one that for you that you've noticeably seen with Morton? They have brought in a few interesting signings, a few younger lads that it's mentioned even in his interview. Chris Moore is one that seems to stand out, is getting a lot of praise. And just as well, just about his signing record in general, I noticed a bit of a dissection by one of the Morton fans as well, going through on a sort of individual basis some very, very strong performances out there. Obviously, of course, a few misses. He's never going to get absolutely perfect. But what are you expecting on that front?
It's an interesting one, and I can remember, I think one of the first games I remember watching where Dougie Imrie was in charge at Morton was when we were playing them at Starks at the end of the John McGlynn's last season, and they beat us 1-0 with a brilliant bit of skill from Robbie Muirhead. And I think this was one of the points where they went on one of those big long runs that they have a habit of going on, and he dragged them well clear of trouble and never effectively looked back from there. I mean, Scott makes, I think, some really good points that clearly, as I say, performance-wise, we've probably been pretty level with Morton over the last few seasons, but I'd like to think we do have a few players with that bit of quality. And I mean, I just kind of wonder as well, maybe whether it's when he's been here as an away manager, or maybe when he was being shown around the facilities when the talks were going on, maybe he's seen things and he's thought, we don't have that at Morton. Well, that's really good. I wish we had that. And I don't just mean sprinklers or roofs on stadiums. I mean, maybe other things as well behind the scenes. Maybe he's seen things and he's thought, there's something there that's maybe a wee bit better than what we've got. And I think the thing I would absolutely love to have heard, and I'm sure it must have come up when we were having an interview, with Dougie Imrie was, you've played against this team 10 times or whatever in the last 2 years or so. And, what do you think the strengths of the Wraith Rovers squad is? What do you think the weaknesses are? And what have you done in the past to exploit those weaknesses? Because I think that's a really interesting angle to all this as well. And I will come back to the signing record in a second. I just went off on a massive tangent there. I think that's a really interesting angle, is very rarely in the Championship recently have we had a manager move from one team to another so kind of quickly or so soon after.
Ian McCall going from Ayr to Partick at this level.
Right, God, I mean, that must have been... Because the last one I could think of off the top of my head was Peter Grant, which went super well for everybody's benefit. That was a right good wheeze. Anyway, no, it's, like you say, it doesn't happen that often. So having a manager who, as I say, who has been used to playing against you so many times is going to be a really interesting dynamic. Bear in mind as well, just to build on Scott's point about it being a tough month, but Imrie being up for it. Dougie Imrie has beaten Ross County. He's just beaten them 3-0. And he's also been one of the guys that has gone to McDermott Park and taken points off St Johnstone. So you'd like to think he's at least coming into those games with knowing something about how to get an objectively weaker squad to get something out of those games. Now, but to come back to the signings point is a super interesting one. And I've vented about this many times when we've been on the end of something with Morton. Imrie seems to be really good at spotting potential in players. Guys there like Nathan Shaw's a good example. So I remember us seeing Nathan Shaw when he was at Inverness, and because it was Inverness, of course they were going to beat that spot. You're looking at this and you're thinking, this is a guy who's going to be playing part-time football. And he's, turned into a very competent player at Morton under Dougie Imrie. Cameron Blue's been another one. Aaron Lyle, as you mentioned. The boy Delaney, he was another one who was at Inverness. And I remember a game up at Inverness where Delaney actually had to be taken off, or he had to shift the formation because we were giving him such a torrid time with the big scary winger at his Conor McBride. So, the point is, there are players there who have been right on the cusp of falling out of full-time football, and Dougie Imrie's clearly been able to spot something and work with it and kind of get something out of them. On a very immediate and practical point, it does make me wonder if we'll see big Filip Stuparovic coming in January. I don't know about the other games. He scored against us enough times. He was there at Morton with Dougie Imrie last season. He can't be far away at Motherwell. So, that's one tip I'm going to put out now. But no, as I say, he's got this record of getting stuff out of players. And I just hope we can see some of that when he gets to work over the next month and in January.
Yeah, that's one that it makes me wonder, because I think part of the difficulty that he'll have probably had with Morton is being able to, I think it's fine to get the players in the door and to be able to build them up and say, like, look, you're a good footballer, we can get the best out of you, we can get you believing. And particularly once he's had a few of those come through, to be able to go and say to other players, right, I've done this with this player and this with this player, I can make you a better player, I can get you improving. I think the difficult part for him was quite probably being able to retain these players, to the likes of Robbie Muirhead, George Oakley in particular, to sort of say to them, like, look, you're a key mainstay in here. The fans absolutely love you. If you stick, we can build something. But then they're getting offered maybe more money from an Ayr United or a Livingston, and that in turn affects a rebuild almost every sort of season. So keen to see if that's something that, Scott, we've offered him a 2.5-year deal. I know that we tend to, as a club, our board tend to favour the sort of longer term, and obviously you need to incentivise people to come through the door. But do you think that's a positive to see that they've still got that sort of objective in mind of being able to say, right, we're trying to build something here, we're trying to build for the future. We maybe haven't had the same success as we'd hoped with Barry Robson, for example. Neil Collins obviously leaves to go to America. Ian Murray leaves just one game into last season after a very successful year before. But is it encouraging to sort of see that sort of groundwork there and continuing to make inroads on that basis?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, to be fair, these sort of days, I think, especially like during the season, it's quite standard to see sort of 2.5 year deals at this sort of level for managers. I don't think you'll ever see somebody going really and getting a bigger deal than a 3-year deal anyway, for sure. So, and I think, to be fair, I don't think Dougie Imrie would have left for an 18-month deal. I think it had to be a 2.5-year deal minimum. So, I'm kind of fine with that at the same time, because I mean, ultimately, if he does get an absolute great tune out of these players, kicks us on, and we were to make the playoffs, say, and then have a good playoff run, again, you just know that anybody sort of does well in the championship, ultimately the first job that goes in the top flight, they kind of sometimes look down at the championship going, is there a chance that I maybe go for somebody that's doing well down there? So you've got that security if he does do well. But then again, I know that obviously Ian Murray was sacked after 6 months of his 3-year extension as well. So, but I think it's been known that in these sort of longer contracts, I think that the Rovers probably have been smart in terms of what they put in these contracts. They're not going to be paying a 3-year deal. Like, that's not going to happen. They've got clauses in that they maybe only pay 3 or 4 months or something, so that they can then go and look for a new manager, like they've just done with Robson as well. So I do think that this is almost like a last chance saloon for a few players, but also I think it's kind of not quite last chance. But if this doesn't go well for Imrie and for the club, I think the fans have then got to start questioning the board and the recruitment and all this, because at the end of the day, some of the players haven't been up to standard, but also the managers have ultimately not been up to standard either. So I think this is a massive appointment. Like, the fact that if this doesn't go well, where do you go for there? Because we've then everybody. I mean, even the sort of outside, social media of looking into the Rovers are going, oh, there's another manager going at Wraith Rovers, and we've turned into almost like a laughing stock with managers in the last 2 years or less than that. And so everybody just assumes that Dougie Imrie's not going to be here for long, or that we'll just get rid of him as soon as we go on a bad run. But yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what sort of, and to be fair, I think Dougie Imrie does say that in his interview about, look, I understand that if I don't get good results, I'm probably not going to be here.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, he's not been sacked in his managerial career yet, but I think it's obvious that every manager at some point in their career will get sacked. It's just the way that football is these days. So I do think that, I hope, as I said earlier, I hope that it does go well for him, because then it means that Race Rovers is going well. But I think it's honestly that I don't think I can say as much that this is a massive one for the club, because if it doesn't go well, I can genuinely see fans not being happy with the board at all.
Yeah, I mean, look, the board are businessmen. They're ultimately, they know football as well. They're all passionate football people, and I think they know certainly my interactions that I've had, the very admittedly limited interactions that I've had with them. They know how things work, in the sense that if it's not going well, they'll get criticism, and they'll be fully happy to accept the criticism, I suspect, in terms of there'll be some things where, look, you're never going to win people over, or people get the wrong end of the stick. And as far as outside of the club, you mentioned obviously a bit of a laughing stock about his appointments and things. I think we sacked like the same number of managers as Dunfermline within the last year, but then they had the one with Tidser that was a lot more brutal than Barry Robson, if we're being honest. Now, what I would counteract that point would be to say that everyone outside Wraith Rovers is always going to tell us how pish we are, effectively, because that's the way that football operates. You basically spend your time looking at 9 other clubs in your league saying, what a joke they are, or having a wee dig at them, effectively. And your club's like, look, we've got our issues, but it's us, we love us. So I almost can certainly tell you what would happen if it didn't go well. I think people would say, why didn't we get Rhys McCabe instead? And, we've paid money, and look down that route. I mean, I did find it intriguing that the record came out and effectively said in the article yesterday that was basically like, Dougie Imrie's going to say yes to this, was like, right, they basically name-checked that we interviewed Rhys McCabe, Chris Doolan, who'd been successful with Partick Thistle in terms of getting them to the playoffs, and then obviously tailed off earlier this year. And then as well, David Gold at Arbroath. I thought that was an intriguing one, just in the sense that they're flying high at the moment. He's maybe trying to get a move while his stock's quite high, because these things can change quickly. But I do think Dougie Imrie, for me, I think he's a really astute choice. Certainly, I wouldn't have had that opinion if we were going for him, and I made that very vocally clear when we went for Ian Murray. I wasn't alone about that. But look, it's football. Football fans by nature are very fickle. I'm sure Dougie Imrie's heard a lot worse than a daft lad, a couple of lads talking on a podcast. And it's one where, yeah, I'm really keen to see what he brings to the table. And certainly, right, we'll talk about the interview now, because it was just 5 minutes long, which I had to go and double check the time because there was so much to pull out of it. I think Barry Robson could have given a 20-minute interview and you would not have got the same level of enthusiasm and sort of, I don't know, vigour that comes out of this one, involving Dougie Imrie and of course Davey from Ref TV. So I'm going to pick out some quotes from this, and I'm just going to ask each individually about them. So firstly, Leslie, to come back to yourself, Dougie Imrie specifically calls out straight away bridging the gap with the community. How big and important, or how important a factor is that to have a manager that sort of, look, Barry Robson's had a lot of criticism in terms of the way that the interactions that he sort of had. Maybe he came across as being quite distant, maybe not the most invested. Do you think that could be a big factor in terms of the PR campaign, shall we say, to win people over, and how clear it is that Dougie Imrie is already coming out to sort of say, look, I'm here, I want to get involved, I want to see everyone, want to try and get everyone, make sure that we're all on the same page, whether it's players, whether it's going to be coaching staff, whether it's going to be fans, whether it's going to be going right through the club. What did you make of that from him?
100%. So this is another area where I think ourselves and Morton are probably quite similar. There are clearly differences in ownership models and things like that. But in terms of the sort of size of the fan base, as I say, the performances and the ethos of the club and the size of the support, we're probably pretty similar. So having a manager coming in from a team where I think he probably gets that. He probably understands the sort of investment that the supporters have, and probably even more so than Rovers, coming from a club that is ostensibly to an extent fan-owned, or at least to whatever extent that is. He recognises, he understands, I would think, very well what it means to be a manager of a club that's embedded within a community and where the support are very much invested in the kind of success and the fortunes of the club. So I mean, that's not to say that Barry Robson didn't have that. I mean, it maybe didn't come across, but he's come from a background of, he was at Aberdeen, which clearly is a very large club. He played a lot of his career at Celtic, which is a flipping massive club. Again, it's not to say Barry Robson didn't do that stuff. I mean, for all we know, Barry Robson could have been really good mates terms with the mascots, and it just never came across. But I think that matters. Weirdly enough, I always got the impression too Neil Collins got that. Just despite having played at a very high level down in England and been over in the US, and you always got the impression that Neil Collins understood that. And again, I don't know if that came from his time in the States or whether it was just something he happened to naturally get as a human being. But I'm getting that same sort of feeling from Dougie Imrie. He recognises right away what kind of club this is, and that there's clear parallels to Morton. And also, as we've talked about so much with Barry Robson, that stuff, you can't run a football team on vibes, but that stuff does matter when it comes to kind of credit in the bank. So, again, I did always think it was quite surprising and interesting that nobody ever talked about the injuries Robson was having to deal with towards the end, because he had zero credit in the bank. And to an extent, all that community stuff, it does matter, and it's what gets you the time, the kind of the credit with the support. So I was really, really heartened and encouraged to see Imrie mention that right away.
Yeah, and he didn't touch on any military history podcast, Scott, but what he did talk about was getting the confidence back into the players. He's renowned in terms of his man management skills, and he's certainly brought that to the table with Morton and been able to get the best out of those there, particularly in his first season, as I mentioned, being able to turn around the club that was really flagging. How vital do you think that could be to some of the players? I know certainly, I mean, Scott Brown had mentioned recently in the piece with the Courier that he felt that fans getting on the players' backs quite easily. do you think this could really offer a fresh reset, hopefully, for everyone, and being able to move? And do you think that that's quite important for the players as well, to have someone there that they know is going to, if they're putting in the effort, putting in the work, which we know that they do, it's just not been paying off for them, that they've got someone there that's going to be vouching for them, going to be encouraging them and try to get the best out of them, but also not taking any prisoners?
Absolutely. I think in terms of a sort of man manager, a motivator, I think that's probably one of your number one candidates you could have went and got at this level anyway. So I think that's been definitely a sort of big tick for the board when recruiting him, as well as the fact that he's probably came across as quite an enthusiastic guy who is also just like a proper, I know it goes around quite sort of flippantly, but a proper football man, as they say, is like he's just the sort of guy who just wants to win games, wants his players to play well, and you can see him on the sidelines always sort of heading every ball, jumping for stuff, and being really involved in the game, as well as just being on the touchline. But I think for the players, it potentially is the sort of kick up the backside that they probably need, because ultimately the players have been, as much as Barry Robson maybe was, the players have been ultimately failing on the pitch this season because they've definitely been underperforming. I mean, we on paper, and I know football isn't played on paper, but on paper we should be. I know we're not massively points wise behind the likes of Ayr and Dunfermline, but that's the sort of teams we need to be in and about in this league come the end of the season, because these are the sort of teams that most seasons we're maybe sort of budget wise and sort of when you look at the start of the season, sort of predictions wise, these are the sort of teams everybody expected us to be competing with. So yeah, I hope that there's a few a sort of lease of life in a lot of these players, that there's maybe a little bit monkey off the back, that they can just kind of go out and play their game. I also am kind of glad that his first game is a Scottish Cup game, because it's almost like forget the league this week and just kind of go out fresh slate, go out and just do what you need to do against Alloa. And then maybe that breeds that little bit extra confidence going into, obviously, if the result's a good result, breeds a bit of confidence going into the league the following week against St Johnstone, which is as tough a game as you can arguably get currently away up in Perth. So yeah, I do think that Imrie, for that side of things, is probably one of your sort of main guys to have brought in to try and motivate this squad. So yeah, to your point, I do think that I would agree that he probably is the guy to do that. And actually, just lastly, I think there's a few players, I did touch on it briefly, was earlier, that there's a few players that are kind of last chance saloon now under this manager at the club. So they also probably, and they'll know it themselves, because the players know when they're not playing well and they're not up to standard. So I think there's a few that guys that are maybe running out of contracts or needing to, if they're not going to be with us, got to put themselves in the shop window anyway. So I think there's a few couple of months coming up that there's some players that really need to get going and get their finger out pretty much.
Yeah, I think that on that one though, I would say I think we've got the right man in charge to try and get a tune out of them and to be able to get them moving forward. I know it's going to be very, very trite to say, and I've kind of picked up on it before, but I mean, I touched on it at the start with Morton when he first joined there. They were rock bottom of the league, and then they went and got, I think in his first game for them, they got a 1-1 draw against Kelly, and then the game after, they pumped Dunfermline 5-0. Now, if you want to replicate that, I know that it's a little bit down the line, but yeah, to be able to do that at Starks would be phenomenal. But we can but hope and see a positive change. I do think it's a really big thing to be able to have that sort of reset. I think that for the club at the moment, that there's been so much humming and hawing across the board, and sort of people kind of looking about like fans unhappy, players clearly lacking, as he says, that bit of confidence. And I think it's a huge thing if we can potentially get in a uniting figure, that's someone that we can all rally around. You know, it's a lot's been made about siege mentality, and to be able to have that, to be able to sort of garner that, and to be able to get people believing again, because we aren't far off the playoffs. Ultimately, we're 4 points behind. Dunfermline lost during the week against Partick away. Ayr seem to be in a bit of a difficult run at the moment. So I think if we can get ourselves looking upwards rather than looking down the table and get a few results on board, particularly against the bigger teams, it will really rejuvenate the campaign, and to be able to get people turned around, because I feel like we've really been lacking that in the last month or so. It's been very clear, and I think it's understandable because the performances have been poor, the results haven't been great, but that's in the past now, and I think it's all about progressing and moving forward. Les, to come to you, he references quick, exciting football. Is that something that you would be more than happy to see from the live streams?
Well, no manager is ever going to come in and say, "Look,
I know
we're going to sit in." I think it did actually happen. It was the early 90s. It was John Lambie, and it was either Falkirk or Partick, and he came in and he said, "Look, you guys finished last season third. That was a fluke. We're in a relegation battle and we've got to play accordingly." And predictably, it went absolutely disastrously. So, no manager is ever going to come in and say, "Look, we're going to sit in and we're going to..." I'm sure even Barry Robson would have said, "We're going to play fast, exciting football and be on the front foot." But, again, just to come back to something I said a bit earlier, I'm interested to see what Dougie Imrie would change with what he has at his disposal to make that happen. Because, we do have players in the squad who who've shown at points under Barry Robson they can press with that kind of intensity. And Paul McMullen being one who's got pace, that it'd be interesting to see, I think, what Imrie might try and get out of him, and how he might use Jack Hamilton differently, whether we might see if we can get something out of Callum Smith, for example. So, we've got players that can play like that. But I'm just interested to see how we're going to make that playing on the front foot happen with the squad that we've got. So, clearly we started the season with that level of intensity. We saw it at various points with Robson, but then it kind of dropped off for whatever reason. So how we rejuvenate that, whether we try and reinterpret that, is going to be interesting to look out for. And as I say, the fact that Dougie Imrie has played against us so many times, and already twice this season has played against our team, has been beaten by us and has then snatched a point against us, just to see what insights he can bring from that. And he did mention that in his interview as well. Look, I've played against this team a lot. I know the Championship really well. How that's going to influence how he sets up is going to be interesting, how that transpires into tactics and trying to play on the front foot.
Yeah, and let's just to stick with you. He references obviously mentioning there about knowing the league inside out. Does that give you a bit of hope that he might have an ace up his sleeve come January time, and sort of what's needed, what's required? You've mentioned Big Philip Stuparovic, I believe, earlier on, looking down those lines as to what might be available.
Yeah, you'd imagine he'll have his eye out. And I don't know, to be honest, what's come with Dougie Imrie with regards to backroom staff. I know Andy Millen's come as well, but I don't know what he's bringing with him in the way of scouts and the way of kind of the wider network that he has. So, I know that at points last season when Morton dissected us with 2 goals down at Capello, okay, granted, they're far from the only team to realise that you can score by sprinting through the middle of us. But whether he's bringing any of the coaching that's enabled that to happen, whether he's bringing any of the scouts that are going to help him to pick people up. Like you mentioned earlier, Robbie, Chris Moore was an interesting one. I think came up, he'd been at, I want to say it's Bournemouth, I could be wrong though, but he'd definitely been down south. Maybe I'm thinking Kiefer Moore, somebody totally different. But yeah, I think it was Leeds, yeah. The Moore I was thinking of was Kiefer Moore. But anyway, there's a player that's come from down south through whatever link he had. So I think that is, when we talk about recruiting players in Scotland, it does tend to be guys you are talking about quite a small pool. And you're then looking for what, like I was saying before, what Dougie Imrie seems to have done quite well is picking up guys like Owen Moffat, like Nathan Shaw, guys where you're looking around, maybe guys that are on the fringes of teams a bit higher up in the division who've sort of fallen out of favour and are and looking at being released or something, and then saying, look, there's something there that I can work with and there's something I can get out of that. Whether we're able to get guys off other teams in the division is probably quite unlikely. But again, it might be looking at the lower end of the Premier League. So, who maybe in the last couple of years has maybe gone up to Premier League teams and isn't quite fitting in, who's maybe playing in League One for quite a lot of money and because of financial situations might find themselves without a club in January. So I think there's that experience to look around and know who did well a couple of years ago. As I say, Stupanovic is the one that comes to mind simply because I know he was scoring goals for Morton. I think everybody else is pretty much going to be locked into year-long deals, so unless we've got cash to spend, we're not going to be able to bring someone in.
Yeah, I think it's really looking at either loanees or potentially players that have came because the League of Ireland's a summer league. Danny Mullins, one that I sort of mentioned before. Now I know that he's probably quite easy to look at his scoring record and sort of maybe be a bit dismissive of it, but at the same time he would offer something a bit different. And as well, I think he got 11 goals last season in the League of Ireland, so whether that's something a bit different that we can go for, and then that's maybe not been referenced yet, who knows? But aye. Anyway, moving forward though, Scott, one quote, it wasn't in the interview itself, but he actively mentioned that he wants to get the place rocking in terms of Starks Park. That good to see as well, just that focus on the fan base, as we'd mentioned before, and being able to sort of try and the importance placed on being able to have a positive environment about Starks Park, because we've really not had that since probably about the Ian Murray year, maybe towards the end of last season, if at a push, but really that second Ian Murray season.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Imrie as well, because he's been so up close and personal in terms of managing against us for the last 3 and a bit seasons or whatever it is, he saw under Ian Murray against his own teams and when he was at Starks Park himself, just what the sort of vibe about the place, the feeling was during that season. He openly said he was there that night that Scott Brown scored that absolute belter against Dundee United. So, I mean, if he was there for that night, he certainly saw a Starks Park that was absolutely rocking and bouncing, because I think that was one of the points that folk actually believed that we might win the league that season. So, ultimately, it's only going to be rocking if he can get the results on the park. So that's genuinely the way to do it. I think to begin with, he might have to, especially for that first month, he might have to try and resort to potentially not doing exactly what he maybe wants to do in the long run with the Rovers, but he might just have to kind of go like, this is what I've got now. I've also got quite a few players sort of out and injured now, so I'm going to have to try and find a different way to get the best tune out of these players until January, till he can get sort of some players recruited and get a bit of extra health in the squad and that sort of stuff. So I do think it's it's always big for a new manager anyway, but these next 5 weeks are going to be crucial for him to try and get the fans back on side again, get the place rocking as he said, but also just try and get some results on the board between that. I mean, if he got into December, if he got out of December with two wins out of 4, whether that's whoever, obviously preferably one of them being the Derby game, but if he got 2 wins out of 4 and maybe a draw and a loss, I think you couldn't argue with that. That would be a pretty good record considering what we've just witnessed since basically the end of September. Because we really, I mean, other than the Partick game, which I think Duncan referenced it the other night, it's actually looking more baffling that we just comfortably came out of there and were 2-0 win.
Yeah.
Because other than that, they've not lost since the first game of the season. So it was just more bizarre the fact that we've struggled to score goals and keep goals out, and we get a clean sheet and beat them. So yeah, hopefully we get that sort of new manager bounce as I referenced earlier, and starting this weekend against Alloa, that we can really score a few goals, but at the same time, I'm well aware that Alloa are going well this season, so I do not expect it to be an easy game by any means.
You know, what really struck me about that interview with Dougie Imrie is it just had all the shades of when Ian Murray used to do interviews, and I think that's a real sort of just the communication, the sort of addressing things, what you want to hear from a manager, and what's been said. And I know a lot of it's like quite easy wins, like Leslie says, like we're going to play fast attacking football. Well, every manager in history has said that basically when they came in. But the communication aspect, the being able to sort of engage with the fans, like just the acknowledgement of like things haven't been going well here before, but we're going to change that. That's in the past. We're going to move forward. We're going to try and get people believing a bit more, which is really really harks back to that second Ian Murray season. So time will tell. Now, of course, we've got Alloa on Saturday, so let's look ahead to that game because that's what we're here to actually do, have a pre-match podcast. Third in League One at the moment, so a strong test to start the Imrie era, as we will now call it, Les.
Absolutely. I mean, I would have been a lot more downbeat if we hadn't actually had a permanent manager in place, because I would have said that that's probably about the level that we're playing at the moment, especially in the attacking areas. We're playing like a upper mid League One team, but we've got the timber hopefully to be better than that. So, Alloa, there are still 4 players in that squad from the season where they denied us the title and then knocked us out the playoffs, albeit most of them don't actually play very much anymore. So Scott Taggart is still there. Roy Hetherington's still there. Andy Graham clearly is still there. And remarkably, apparently Neil Parry is still registered as a player, which I'm sure some Alloa fans might pop up in the comments and tell me that's an error that I've just seen online. But seemingly Neil Parry is registered as a player. Whether he's a player coach or something, I don't know. But it's a team that we have had a lot of close games with in our time down in League One that haven't always gone in our favour. So I did a little bit of homework before we came on. Watched some of the highlights from recent games just to see what I could pick up. And yeah, as I say, it's a team on a very good run. Third, I think, in League One at the moment. Clearly, they're going to be comfortable on an artificial surface as well. Team that like to zip it about also seem to like getting crosses in too, which is something to watch out for. The guy that really caught my eye was Callum Adamson, who's a co-op loan player from Rangers. So another of the co-op loans, and we might come on in a minute as to whether some of these guys will actually be allowed to play or not. I'd imagine they would be. He caught my eye, always trying to make things happen. So it's going to be a tough test. There's, as you'd expect for a League One side, a really good blend of guys that are about 4 million years old and guys that are 19 and probably out on loan from Premier sides. So a lot, there's a lot.
So like our squad then.
Exactly, like our squad, but cranked up. So there's a lot to be, and it's absolutely. I wouldn't even call this a banana skin. It's a close contest between a team that are doing well at the top end of one division and a team that are at the lower reaches the division above.
Les, we were doing poorly, but now we're in the Dougie Imrie era, and that's all changing as far as I'm concerned at the moment. Like, admittedly, I was very much the same when Paul Hanlon took the reins on the interim basis. Yeah, we were exceptionally exuberant in our sort of enthusiasm during that podcast. A few other names that jumped out for me: Stefan Skugel, Connor Salmon, Dave Mackay, of course, centre back, used to play for ourselves, and Luke Donnelly, all players that we've seen sort of over the last few years. Scott, Les has mentioned Andy Graham and the work that he's doing there at Alloa. What are your impressions of him? Do you think he's, naturally going to be linked probably in the near future? I suspect if he's not in the sort of runners and riders for the Morton job itself, actually, ironically enough, maybe a bit of a surprise there. But what have you made of his start to management? Seems quite highly thought of.
Yeah, I think he's done a pretty decent job so far since he's been in charge. Was it earlier this season or was it last season? I can't remember that they went to Ibrox and gave Rangers a pretty good game. I know that ultimately they lost the game, but they went to Ibrox, scored a couple of goals, and actually potentially could have gone to like extra time or penalties and stuff like that. So he clearly has them playing some decent stuff. I'll openly say, unlike Les, I haven't done homework in terms of watching any of their highlights. But I do know that just even from sort of every Saturday looking through the scores in the leagues and stuff and looking at league tables, that clearly they are doing decent enough this season. I did notice that they're actually on quite a decent unbeaten run now. I think they're 9 unbeaten just now. They've not lost since I think the first week of October or something. So they're clearly a team that are going to be full of confidence. I mean, they played last night as well. We're obviously recording Wednesday night, but they played at home to Inverness in a sort of game in hand that they had in League One. Got a positive result in terms of keeping them in the sort of hunt for the league title this season. So, as I say, I mean, we did play Alloa obviously back in the first week of July, but it's very early pre-season.
Yeah,
They had
youth
so
and
many
trialists.
trialists.
Yeah, basically.
So many trialists and guys that probably didn't feature for Alloa again even after that game. I mean, I think there's not much that you can take for that night other than the fact that we've seen them this season. But yeah, their team's going to be so much different. And as I say, they're going to be full of confidence. So I fully expect a tough game, like I say, but I'm hoping with the fact that we've managed to secure a new manager, we get that new manager bounce, as I say, and that we do just get a little bit of a confidence boost and win, because as you never know, just one win could spark. I mean, I said that even after the Partick Thistle win a few weeks ago, that one win might be able to sort of turn your fortunes, but I'm hoping under this new era of Dougie Imrie that he can prove everybody that he is a good manager at this level, and that he can get a tune out of this squad, because we keep saying it week after week that this squad are better than what they're showing.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to get really hard to keep saying that as the week goes on. So, like, at some point they're going to have to show what they're made of. So why not this week go out and really put a good solid performance on, score a few goals, hopefully keep a clean sheet, and yeah, get us through to the next round. Because I mean, if we can get a good cup run along with getting a sort of more stabilised league position, then you're always going to be benefiting as a club in terms of potentially getting through a couple of rounds in the cup and getting some extra cash. I mean, ultimately, if you get through this round, you're guaranteed into obviously the next round of the cup. Could get a sort of bigger tie, but it means then it's just that little bit extra cash that the club might need for an extra player in January as well for Dougie Imrie. So these are the sort of things that are definitely big for the club. So hopefully, we can come out on the right side of this one on Saturday.
Yeah, you never want to be in the position that we were in back in, I think it was like 2009-10, the season that we actually won the old second division, where we went to Alloa and it was a midweek game in the cup because I think the Saturday game had been called off, and we'd not had a sort of decent Scottish Cup tie for years, and we went there with the expectation we're top of the league, we're going to win this game, and then we went ahead through Gary Wales, and then Alloa got 2 goals late on. I think it was Brown Ferguson that got them. And next thing you know, they're drawing Aberdeen in the cup, and we're going through on an absolutely rotten day to Stirling. And Alloa is absolutely full, chock-a-block with Aberdeen fans. And you're thinking, at that point, you were like, well, when's that going to be us? Unfortunately, it was a few years later down the line when Gregory Taddy and Ian Williamson were up to their heroics. But yeah, the Scottish Cup, it brings the sort of magic itself. Les, Scott's already mentioned there the opportunity. It's a breakaway from the league. Do you think that's a good thing for the Rovers squad at the moment, or does it add on a degree of pressure?
Just before I answer, I'm just going to come in and not correct, but just a kind of counterpoint to the thing about us getting knocked out by somebody and then them getting the big money draw. TX Rover has pointed out that that's not what happens, because the balls are numbered. So the whole thing would be completely different. And it's not as if, these guys knocked us out, then they got Celtic. The numbering would then be totally different. But it is nice to think like that. But no, it is.
I'm a simpleton.
I am as well. I mean, I can take no credit for that. It's just something I saw posted by TX Rover. So thanks, TX, for mentioning that and peeing in the porridge. But no, I mean, it is. I mean, what I was actually thinking as you were talking is, to an extent, you kind of think the ideal game you'd want to start a manager off in a squad that's snookered with injuries and all this would be a Challenge Cup game or something where the stakes are virtually non-existent and you effectively have a training exercise. At the same time, though, if you go out and win and there's a good feeling about the place, then you can kick on from there. Yeah, having this game when we have it, I think is good. I'm not sure how far away any of the injured players are from coming back. So I think Fordyce won't be back till well into next year. Vaughan is a bit of an enigma. We've not been hearing a lot. Chin, possibly. December he was touted for being back. So I don't know whether that extra week or whatever is just going to be enough to then get one or two bodies back. You've got Sean Byrne, Ross Matthews as well, both carrying knocks. Maybe that extra week is just what we need to get a couple of extra players back and give us that little bit more bandwidth before we go back into the next onslaught of league games. If we could have something like a flipping massive snowstorm that then wiped out the next round of fixtures, then even better, and kick the can down the road with the whole thing. No, I think it is good. You're also don't, not to discount the fact that you're actually getting to play someone different, because it's a real treadmill in the Championship when you play every team at least 4 times a season. These guys again, we only had them 6 weeks ago, so that counts for something too. I think just having a change of opposition and a change of competition, and being in a slightly different scenario as well. Hopefully it at least gives us a chance to get a few bodies back and just do something a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, even in itself, you've got Paul Hanlon can now just focus on the day job. He'd done an admirable job, well respected within the club, and they were showering him with praise for how he conducted himself in the interim as manager. But he can just get back to focus on what he needs to at the moment, which is obviously the defensive side and making sure that he's been that strong leader on the pitch. Scott, are there any changes that you would be expecting to see yourself going into this one? Would you want to see things mixed up at all, or do you think it's too difficult to say at the moment going into this one?
I do think it's quite difficult to try and say that there will be changes to the lineup purely down to the fact that we are kind of limited to what we can do just now. I think had Imrie had almost a full squad to sort of pick from, then it might have been a different story. The sort of lineup that I was looking to go with was just pretty similar to what we went with last week. I know that it wasn't pretty up at Rove last week, but at the end of the day, we got a clean sheet and we didn't get beat. Yeah. So there's a positive right away for us that we didn't get beat and we didn't concede. I think the only change that I kind of looked at potentially making was, and again, he's not played terribly since he's came into the team, but I was looking at potentially taking Paul Nacio out and putting Byrne in if fit. But again, I think it's going to be touch and go whether he's going to make it. Ross Matthews hasn't even been in the squad the last few weeks either, so again, we don't know how far away he is. Potentially, is this a game that somebody like Kai Montague could get a start? Yeah. I mean, he's the sort of player that I think that Dougie Imrie might take a good liking to. Somebody that's just going to be getting sort of in about things. He's happy to be getting on the ball. He wants to drive forward with the ball as well. And he is, like, for the most part, he's quite fearless in terms of just being on the park and just doing his own thing. So it might be a sort of player that is a good player to put in the sort of number 10 position, link up the midfield and the sort of striker as well. But I suppose we'll wait and see. But yeah, I've kind of just gone with the same sort of lineup as last week, with just like a slash between Nacio and Byrne to see who goes in that midfield. But I would like to see us actually. I know that I tend to go for like a 4-2-3-1 when it comes to this Rovers squad, but I've been quite insistent on going to like almost a 4-4-2 in the last few weeks just to try and get a striker beside Jack Hamilton, because Hamilton on his own just hasn't been working. And even if you've got Easton, McMullen or Mullen, like these sort of guys, yes, they're good players on their day, but it's not the same as having this sort of strike partner beside you. So I think if we can get Callum Smith up there, potentially Josh Gentles if he's allowed to play. We've already touched on it. I don't know what it's going to be like for the lone players if they're going to be allowed to play in these games. It's the same for Ewan Wilson. Again, don't know if Motherwell would allow that just in case they run into injury troubles and stuff, and then he's cup tied. So I think if these loan players are not available, we could see maybe potentially only 3 or 4 subs on Saturday, which would be a little bit. Yeah, not great to see, but at the same time, yeah, hopefully, as Les touched on earlier, Chin maybe isn't too far away. Hopefully, Vaughan, again, we don't know, but isn't too far away, and the likes of Byrne and Matthews as well. So, yeah, I wouldn't be changing too much from last week's lineup overall.
And for you, Les, is there anything that differs on that front? Are you very much of the same mindset?
Scott makes a good point. We didn't lose last week. We didn't concede. We weren't blowing out the water. We weren't hanging on by our fingertips for a draw. There's nothing immediately. I think you would definitely change that. The Montague was the one that I'd had down as well as a possible. That I think exactly as Scott says is the kind of player Dougie Imrie might think, right, there's something there. On you go, push up and see what you can do. Don't worry if you don't get everything right. We're here for you, and we're backing you. Montague's the one I might expect to see coming in. Further down the line, I'd be interested to see what Imrie thinks he can do with Jay Rowe and with Paul McMillan. If he thinks he might, because again, McMillan, we talked about that in the post-match after Arbroath. We saw more from him than we have in the whole of the season combined. Actually, strange enough, driving through the middle and trying to make things happen. So whether we see something there, whether Imrie sees something on the training ground that he thinks there's a role for them, I wouldn't expect to see that many changes though. Beyond that, yeah, the point as well, I wouldn't have thought Niso and Gentles would be cup tied. You wouldn't have thought that Rangers would think we're going to need these guys. But you never know. You never know what directive comes down. Wilson, I agree with Scott. I don't think we'll see Wilson because he played so many games for Motherwell last season. They may also be looking for a new manager very soon, judging by the mood music. You would imagine Motherwell saying, look, he may be needed if we go deep into the competition. So I'd be surprised if Wilson was available. But I think that I don't expect to see much difference to the starting lineup. The possible one being Montague potentially coming in for somebody in the midfield area, but beyond that, I wouldn't see much different to start with.
Yeah, I think those are all fair comments, and I think it's the situation with the loanees is one to keep an eye on how it develops, and I think that also goes for Lewis Gibson as well at Montrose. Sort of keeping an eye out if he's allowed to play, because I know that a lot of people, particularly the chat online, has been like, right, what's the script? Can we get him back for the second half of the season? Dougie Imrie will be watching him training. Might not necessarily go down the best in terms of him because he'll want to get as much game time as possible, but ultimately people sort of pointing out, like, he is a Rovers player, we do have a shortage at the moment to be able to have him back. We wouldn't be able to play him until January because of the sort of registration windows. Again, that's probably text knowledge, TX Rover knowledge getting imparted there, but yeah, want to keep an eye on nonetheless. So the only other bit of business before we move into Should McStay or Should Dargo, which Leslie's prepared rather terrifyingly. Already got a headache at the moment. Tomorrow evening is the Rafe Trust AGM, which is going to be at the Macmillan Suite at 7 p.m. So if you are a Trust member, just a heads up that is on the go there tomorrow if you want to head by there. So Les, if you want to take us away with Should McStay or Should Dargo, how many clues have you got?
I've got 6.
Okay.
Got 6. I'm pretty confident somebody will get it at some point tonight. Clue 1.
I hope so.
I have played against Paul Hanlon and Barry Robson.
Right.
Yeah. straight away, I just think it's going to be somebody of a decent age, but
it could be.
because Barry Robson probably retired about what 2017, something like that.
Yeah,
did he retire?
Must have been about that point. I don't know. Gordon Smith. It's always funny when you look back upon your first guess and you're like, I was so wildly far off the mark.
Yeah, I've not really got a clue. Sean Byrne.
Okay. I have played within 5 kilometres of the Kingston, Kincardine, Tay and Keswick bridges.
There we go.
So it was Kingston,
Kincardine, Tay, Keswick bridges.
Tay and Keswick. Right. So who's played for? I mean, Kincardine's a funny one because could be Falkirk, could also be Alloa.
Yeah.
And Alloa would be very topical. Kingston Bridge. I'm going to guess that's what, Hull, is it? Well, no. Showing my lack of English geography. Apologies to Bob the Pledge.
I'm absolutely crap at it. I'm just going to check I have actually got the right bridge. Oh, it is. I do have the right bridge, thank goodness.
So they've basically played, going by that, even just ignoring 2 of the bridges anyway, they've played for Dundee United or Dundee, and they've played for probably Alloa or Falkirk as well. That's the way that I'm looking at it.
And then Keswick's going to be Calais or County. Because
County is too far from 5 kilometres, is it not?
Yeah, I guess.
Or Clough.
So, they've basically played. They've probably played for Inverness, one of the Dundees, and then Alloa or Falkirk, and then us. Who's? Nah, he's not played for Inverness.
The only player I can think of with regards to like Alloa and Dundee United is Ryan McCord. But I don't think he would have been down at the Kingston Bridge. Or maybe.
Yeah, I don't think he's played for Inverness either.
Hold on, I'm getting confused here. Kingston Bridge, is that what's the one over by Glasgow? Is that the Erskine? I don't
There
know.
are multiple bridges.
Yeah, Erskine's over towards Dumbarton, is it not?
Aye. I'm not going to lie, lads. I shat myself for a second thinking I'd had another Marvin Andrews in Edinburgh moment.
I'm going to skip just because it's really annoying me because I keep thinking of a player and I'm going, they've not played for Inverness or something, so
let's hurry it along for the benefit of the listeners.
Clue 3. As a manager, honours I have won include the Quest Engineering Cup and the Midland League.
And what was the first one?
The Quest Engineering Cup and the Midland League.
Okay, so they must be managing lower leagues down south then.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just classing that the Midlands obviously is going to be down south. I mean, whether the Scottish tiers have like a Midland section, I don't know. Like far enough down. And pass on what the hell the Quest Engineering Cup is.
So just to recap,
again, I don't think he's played for Inverness, but I'm just going to get off of Sean Byrne, Paul Watson.
Okay. Any advance from you, Robbie? Just to recap.
No, not really, to be honest. Not really.
Right. Clue 4. My transfer away from the Rovers was in similar circumstances to the departures of Davy Sinclair, Brad Spencer and Lewis Jameson. So I left the Rovers in the same circumstances as Davy Sinclair, Brad Spencer and Lewis Jameson.
Right, so that's going to be a former manager taking them with them as they left. So John McGlynn left, he took Spencer, Neil Collins took Jameson, and obviously Sinky with Jimmy Nicholl.
Okay.
And I have just realised the Kingston Bridge is actually in Glasgow. So it's...
Well, before he said Spencer, I started to think, was it guys that had either all gone down south, like leaving, or was it guys that had went abroad or something? But then I was like, nah, it can't be that. Played against Hanlon and Robson as well.
Got to say, belter clues.
Actually, I think I've maybe got a right shot here, but I'm not sure if he's not played. Has he played for Alloa or Falkirk? Lewis Toshney.
Lewis Toshney, that'd be a good shout. Played for Dundee United.
He's also played. He's currently managing. Is it no Dundee North End or something?
Yeah, was that Celtic? So it would fit in there. He's been up at Cali. Yeah, I think that's actually a really, really good shout.
And did McKinnon take him?
Yes, United? He did, actually. That's a good point. So, aye. We'll go for clue 5. Clue 5 and 6. It's all with you.
I played 170 games in a senior career spanning 9 years.
That would sound about right.
Loads of injuries, so every chance.
Any advance from anybody on Toshney for Scott and Gordon Smith for Robbie?
No.
Okay, clue 6. Complete the following song to the tune of Nelly the Elephant. Ray McKinnon packed his bags and went away to United. Then he came back for blank to expletive, expletive, expletive. Scott is right, it is Lewis Toshney.
Well done, Scott. That is really, really
I don't know. I tell you what actually made me, in the end, made me go for him was the fact that he's managing at a non-league club. So I thought, and as I said, the Midland thing threw me at first. I thought, is it somebody that's down south? But down the leagues, they do regionalise a lot of the cups and stuff. So I thought, might as well. But was he at Falkirk or Alloa?
He was at Falkirk for a bit, wasn't he? He was at Alloa as well, was he not?
I completely forgot that stint.
I'm away to have a look. Honestly, I thought Kingston Bridge was down south. So
that was when
let's be honest.
When his name popped into my head, that was the only club I wasn't sure about was Alloa Falkirk. I wasn't sure.
He basically went to. No, it was Falkirk that he was at. He had 8 appearances there. He didn't appear for Alloa.
No wonder I didn't even remember it then.
Yeah, that explains a lot. It's Benedictus I'm mixing up with in terms of the stint at Alloa that he had before he joined us. Fair play to both of you, Les. That was a really, really good Should McStay or Should Dargo. Even if I didn't enjoy the experience, I've got to commend your clues that you've put together there, and Scott as well, especially for getting that one. Because it's, as I say, excellent detective work. Right, we will be back following the game on Saturday to kick off the Imrie era. So hopefully we can get off to a positive start and we can get right behind the Rovers. As I say, he's made a very impressive PR campaign start, shall we say, with the first interview. So hopefully more to come on that front, and we can get, as it's been said by many other those behind the tannoys, right behind the Rovers, and we can get back to more positive times, because it's been difficult recently with some of the results and the performances, but hopefully it's a turned round the corner moment, and we can all progress forward. So thank you for taking the time to listen, guys. Thanks for joining me this evening. A podcast I never thought that we would ever have, welcoming Dougie Imrie to Wraith Rovers, but funny the way that football works, and we will be back after the post match. But thanks again for your time, and bye for now.